we're back.
We are back.
You're back, Nate.
Mostly back. 90% back.
Did you leave something on the plane? You lose any baggage?
No. Got home with everything.
Okay.
Which is amazing, actually. Almost missed a flight and they had to check a bag. I never let them check a bag.
Uh-huh.
I don't trust them with my bags. So I always pack everything into a carry-on, but I almost missed my flight, so they checked my carry-on, and I was a little nervous. So,
Good. Where were you flying from?
SFO, San Francisco.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, you guys. Welcome to our viewers.
Hey, guys. Welcome.
Yep. Jason here.
Nate Story here.
Nate. Yeah. I'm a team member here at Bright Agrotech. I'm joined today with our CEO, Nate. And we're going to kick off a discussion today. Operating costs. And one of the questions we've been getting a lot is obviously costs, right?
What do the financials look like? What's the nitty gritty? Give me some real numbers.
Yep. And so we break down a lot of our material. We do a lot of technical information, how to grow the crops, manage your lighting and nutrients.
Yeah.
But we also do quite a bit in financials and consulting.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we do a complete financial analysis on almost every farm that starts up.
Mm-hmm.
So if they know their market pricing or if they can run with our market pricing, we can basically nail down pretty much what their operation is going to look like.
Yeah.
So
That pricing conversation can be really tricky.
it can be.
And we might get a special session to talk about that.
It deserves one.
Trapper, one of our team members here, Trapper and I were going through the numbers and just realizing how much we need to talk about pricing.
Yep.
So you guys can just put that in your mental bank there. We're going to be talking about pricing in upcoming sessions. And we want to kind of understand how these products are different from what you're seeing standard on the grocery store shelf or on the restaurant menu.
Yep.
And how to build that difference in quality into your pricing.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, the biggest, there are two massive mistakes that people make on the front end with these things. But the biggest possible mistake is to go to market and price your product like you would any other product on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know, it's selling it for way, way less than you should be selling it. And there's absolutely no reason,
Mm-hmm.
unless you actually have volume constraints, to price your product at the same pricing as other products at market.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our growers are getting 3 to 4 times standard market pricing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's letting them scale faster, build faster, do more.
Mm-hmm.
And can they sell at a lower price? Absolutely, down the road. But why would you sell at a lower price when there's so much market
Right.
space for a higher price product?
Well, and Trapper's point was, if you're a first-time grower and you walk in and you're negotiating, maybe your first time negotiating ever
That's right.
with a product, a fresh-grown product,
Well,
and your tendency is to take the first offer that you're given.
absolutely. And not to push back with produce managers. That's, a huge mistake is not to push back. And the other thing is to realize that the produce manager doesn't understand what your product is until you sell it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think you're just going to be a farmer and not be a salesman, you are greatly mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make the case to the produce manager, this is different, right?
Right.
The branding on this is different. Like if you, in 1996, if you showed up at a grocery store with an USDA organic label on your product, the grocery store manager would have said, yeah, you get the same pricing as everyone else. Because they didn't know what organic was. They didn't understand the value of
Mm-hmm.
organic,
And
right?
the demand for it.
Exactly. But ultimately it's worth twice as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of that little symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And what that symbol represented. So similarly, your products are worth twice as much, 3 times as much, maybe 4 times as much,
Mm-hmm.
the going, market value for that product.
Mm-hmm. We had a little contest in the office this morning. We have a packet of basil that you can buy from Target.
Guess that basil.
Yeah, guess the price of the basil at Target. It's 0.75 ounces. I don't have an image of it for you, but if you're watching, go ahead and let us know in the chat bar. How much do you think it costs for 3/4 of an ounce of basil at Target? And
What do they get if they guess it?
I could
Come on,
trying
make
to
it
come up with
interesting,
a prize.
Jason.
Yeah. We'll get to that later. A bonus prize. Guess the price of that product.
I'll give you a shout out in the next one.
Yeah.
Being a brilliant price guesser.
Yeah.
Price is right for produce. I love it.
0.75 ounces basil at Target.
Which is better than the standard 0.66. So a little bit more bang for your buck there.
Yeah, good. You got omelets. You can use that for pasta. How much is that worth at the store? All right, and we're kind of waiting a minute to let our viewers come in. It's 12:05 here in sunny Laramie, Wyoming.
It's beautiful today.
Yep, and I know it's hotter in other parts of the country. If you were able to tune in last week, we were talking about cooling your greenhouse with Stuppy greenhouses.
Right.
And that's a big deal, keeping your greenhouse cool. And similarly, we're talking about indoor farmers, how to keep your facility cool, especially in hot climates.
Yep. That is consistently been a problem for indoor growers. I think we'll touch on that a little bit today as we're looking at kind of cost composition when we're looking at these operations. But yep, absolutely. This has been a major hurdle is cost of cooling for indoor environments, because even with LEDs, they're emitting a lot of heat.
Yeah.
If they're being installed at the right densities.
Yeah.
So I was talking with there's always I was talking with someone yesterday who had a product that they'd been told produced like no heat for LEDs, which is just not true. LEDs produce a lot of heat, and there's no magical product out there that doesn't produce heat.
So we're going to get into it, Nate. People are wondering how much it costs to operate these farms.
Yep.
Lighting, energy. So let me just lead us off with a question here. When you're looking at growing indoors, for a lot of people, they don't have previous experience with this. It might be a blank spot on the map. How much does it cost to run this farm? And how can I get those numbers for, say, writing a proposal or understanding my business and investment decision?
Yep.
So the question is, what are the two biggest expenses that these growers are facing regularly, monthly or weekly expenses?
Yeah, so the two biggest costs for almost any indoor grower is electricity and labor. And so when we're talking about electricity, we're primarily talking about lighting and HVAC. Those are the two major consumers of electricity. So that's, your lights, how are you lighting your plants? And then HVAC, which is how do you remove all of the heat produced by the lights for your plants? And they fight against each other. So if you're going to up the ante, if you're going to dump more light onto your crops in order to push them faster, you got to put in more HVAC to take care of that heat. And that's expensive, both from a CapEx perspective, of course, which we'll save for another day, but especially from an OpEx perspective, because you are using a lot of electricity to remove the heat generated by using even more electricity.
Right.
The other thing is labor. So you've got electricity and labor, and that's just, the cost of planting, maintenance, and then, of course, all the post-harvest stuff. So harvesting, packaging, and distributing that product.
Good. Yeah, so packaging and distribution, we'll probably touch on that today. But, it comes to mind, how warm, what temperature does lettuce like to have?
So lettuce is more of a cool crop. It prefers temperatures somewhere around 65.
Okay.
So most growers end up in like the 65 to 70 range with lettuce.
Okay.
You can grow it a little higher. You can grow it a little cooler. But photosynthesis is kind of optimized in those mid to 65, 67 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, so we'll get into it. I served in the Peace Corps for several years in Central America, and one of the I worked with agriculture, mostly corn and beans. So one of the ideas that they talk about is the tarea, and a tarea is a measure of land, and it's defined by how much land can one person cultivate. So it's not an acre, it's not a defined unit. It's about how much can one person produce. And they would say, that family has 3 terrarias or 4 terrarias. They have 3 or 4 people each cultivating a plot of land. And so I like to bring in this idea when we're talking about labor, because we're trying to understand, how much can one person do in an indoor farm? And for ZipGrow, we work primarily with ZipGrow Towers. How many ZipGrow Towers can one person handle on a regular crop turn?
Yeah. So I like the idea of, kind of a given size that a single person can handle. I think that that's probably what most folks are interested in when they're talking about, setting up a small business, a business for them, maybe their wife, maybe their kids. So that's really kind of what they're interested in, at least initially. That's kind of the minimum viable size, if you will.
Right.
Right.
Well, maybe they don't want to grow full time. They just want 20 hours a week.
Sure.
To grow in their part time.
Yeah. So I like the concept. It's a great concept. We usually say somewhere around 800 towers per person, and that. That's kind of that's a very general response because it is incredibly crop specific. The labor that goes into it is incredibly crop specific, mostly in the post-harvest labor and packaging, the area of post-harvest labor and packaging, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take much time to plant a seed. So even if you're doing lettuce where you're harvesting every single turn, and replanting, that's going to be about the most aggressive seeding schedule you'll ever have.
Right.
Something like basil or mint are these more long-term crops that you plant and they just go in and they stay there. Those require very little planting. Where all of the labor is there in the post-harvest labor and packaging kind of category.
Okay.
And so if you're cutting a head of lettuce, how long does it take for you to go cut the thing off, stick it in a clamshell, snap it shut, put it in a box, right?
Yeah.
Versus crates, where we're just cutting a head of lettuce, tossing in a crate, toss, putting on a truck, and then paying someone to drive it to the restaurant account.
Gotcha. So going back to this 800 towers, how many plants is that? How many plants can you fit in 800 towers?
For the most part, we're somewhere around, where were we at?
Yeah.
I think 9,600 plants, somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
So, about almost 10,000 plants total for that number of towers, right? We're putting 12 to 14 seedlings in a single tower. So if we're on a 6-inch spacing, then pretty darn close to 10,000 plants, 9,600 plants.
Okay.
That's basically what you're dealing with. That breaks down to about 1,900 plants per week.
Okay. So that's my question then. Are you planting all 10,000 seeds all at once?
No. No. So it depends on the crop, right? So if we're doing basil and we're just going to plant a whole bunch of basil and then cut basil, then that's great. Our labor costs on the front end go down because we're not planting every single week.
Yeah.
Again, that 1,900 plants per week number is really dependent on a 5-week turn.
Okay.
So we tend to be very conservative and say a 5-week turn. Now, it's possible with, especially with kind of the lighting philosophy that we have in regard to our plants, to push that much faster. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Oh, pollen season. To push that a lot faster, so to get closer to like 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Post-transplant. And if you can do that in 3 weeks, then of course the amount of planting that you're doing on a weekly basis goes up. But you're turning now, 17 turns a year instead of 10. So you almost double your overall revenue.
No kidding.
To be clear, that's not the numbers we're working with right now. We're working with kind of worst case scenario.
So you're saying conservative scenario.
Conservative scenario.
A crop of lettuce would spend about 5 weeks in the towers, and so you're planting roughly 1,900, 2,000 seeds per week.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. How long does that take? How long does it take for one person to plant 2,000 seeds?
2,000 seeds usually takes around 4 hours. At least kind of from all of the different measurements we've taken to all the different farmers, that's by hand. Okay. So you're talking usually around 4 hours by hand. If the thing to remember there is that there's some very inexpensive equipment on the market, right? So you can use like a vacuum seeder or something like that.
Yeah.
2,000 seedlings is basically, if you have got about 250 seedlings per tray, you're talking 4 trays,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Or 8 trays.
8 trays.
8
yeah.
trays, right? So you're talking half an hour a tray, which I think that's still pretty conservative. That's just a single person just dropping seed after seed after seed in by hand.
Right.
Which, if you're getting to those volumes, it's really worth looking into like a vacuum seed or something like that. That does a tray in about 3 minutes.
Wow.
4 minutes. And so if you kind of figure out your time, the more seedlings you're doing on a weekly basis, the sooner the payoff is for owning one of those things. So again, that can be reduced down to less than an hour a week probably.
Wow.
With the right equipment.
How many seeds can we fit on one of our seedling racks?
I think our racks out there will take 4 times 6, basically 24 flats if we want.
Okay.
20 to 24.
So one rack can fit over 5,000 seeds, 6,000 seeds.
Yeah, it's adequate. Certainly, if you're doing a 3-week cycle, right? So if you're doing 3 weeks in and then transplant, so 3 weeks from seed to seedling, and then you transplant. A single one of those is adequate to take care of those.
That's amazing.
Now, the one caveat there is if you're doing slower growing seedlings, if you're doing woody herbs, that kind of thing that take longer to transplant, you'll want another one of those racks because those suckers sometimes take 4, 5, 6 weeks in seedling stage.
So you don't want to the idea is you don't want to tie up your seed rack with these herbs because they just take longer to reach adolescence.
Yeah, and I don't mean to kind of throw these things up in the conversation, but the reality is these are general numbers, and it will depend on the crop. So if someone comes to me and says, I need to do an entire zip farm of sage, I'll say, whoa, buddy, make sure you know what you're getting into, right? But that throws those starting numbers way off because it might take 6 weeks to 8 weeks to get it from transplant to get it growing, and 4 weeks in the seedling.
Yeah, so there you have it. About 4 hours for one person to plant 2,000 seeds by hand. And now you've got 2,000 seeds growing. Give them about 3 weeks for a crop like lettuce.
Yep.
Till they reach adolescence. Now you're ready to bring those into the ZipGrow Tower. And again, the same question. How long does it take one person to put 2,000 seeds into a ZipGrow Tower?
A single person, so on our farms, usually a person is working alone, right? So if they're working alone out there, you take a tower down, you place it, you plant it. If you're actually pulling the media, it's usually less than 5 minutes per tower. If you are just transplanting straight into the media, we have growers that are reporting much faster rates, a minute, 2 minutes. But just going with the most conservative number, 5 minutes per tower, right? Which is really a lot of time. You're looking for 800 towers, you're looking at a little over 13 hours a week. So 13 and a half hours transplanting.
Wow. So that's a big part of your labor. You're spending a day and a half or 2 full days transplanting into these towers.
That's right.
Okay, good. So now we've got 2,000 seeds growing in ZipGrow Towers, roughly. These are 7-foot towers. And, that's kind of a look at our labor. Now, we haven't gotten to packaging and distribution yet, but you have recently developed a tool to help people manage their crop turn, right?
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Able Ag planner?
So able.ag, able.ag, it's a farm planning software. It will have more and more management tools as time goes on, but it's basically a very simple tool to help manage the number of seedlings you should be planting and kind of your crop scheduling.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
So yeah, it allows you to take numbers like this and say 800 towers, much at XYZ. These are my outputs, these are my accounts, matching crops with accounts and managing that.
Yeah.
And of course, it helps then to manage what you're harvesting and when.
Right. So there are a lot of moving parts on a farm. Sounds like your Able Ag tool just helps these growers kind of manage all the moving parts, schedule the tasks. If you guys want to check that out, able.ag, and should type that into your browser. That should bring you right to the page. So that's fantastic. Now, right now we've got a question on the table, Nate.
Okay.
I've got 800 towers, and it took me about 2 days to plant seed and plant those crops into the towers. How much is that worth?
So if we're talking lettuce, we can start to look at our numbers, and if we're on 5-week turns at $7 a pound, we end up around $220,000 gross revenue on an annual basis.
Wow.
So that's at $7 a pound. Now that might seem outrageous to folks, but that's actually on the low end of what most of our growers end up ultimately getting at market.
Right.
So for a well-managed farm at the correct scale, right?
Yeah.
That's important. At the correct scale,
Yeah.
with a good market, one person doing the cutting, doing the distribution, you're looking at around $220,000 a year gross.
That's amazing, and that's why we're having this conversation. These are real markets. Restaurants and retailers are asking for locally grown produce. And so the growers that you work with are supplying that produce.
That's correct. Yep.
That's exciting. Now, as we dig a little deeper, we're seeing one person full-time handling roughly 800 towers worth of produce. The question we need to understand then is how much lighting and energy does it require, to bring this crop to harvest?
So if we're digging into our costs, you remember I said our biggest costs are electricity, right? For lighting and for HVAC, or heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and the lights, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two kind of big energy consumption categories for the farm. And then in labor. And I think we're at somewhere around 22 to 26 hours weekly labor, somewhere pre-harvest.
Before we harvest it.
Pre-harvest.
Yeah.
In the 22 to 26 range. And I think that's pretty conservative. I think your maintenance hours, we have those set at about 4 to 8 hours.
Okay.
A week. I think that those would be a little lower.
So you're talking about weekly maintenance on the ZipGrow system.
Yep. Weekly maintenance. So less than 8 hours, probably typically around 4. That's just doing your routine maintenance stuff, right?
Okay.
And then our electrical costs. So we tend, kind of as a preface to the electrical conversation, because we've got our labor now. Our labor is 22 to 26 hours. Our electrical costs on an annual basis are not insignificant. These are big costs, right? And we have a very different philosophy than, say, some of the other farms out there. We push as much light as possible to our crop. We hit our daily light integral numbers as fast as possible, and we rest our plants and we start again, and we push our production. Again, the goal is not to do a 5-week turn, it's to do a 3-week turn, and just about double that revenue, right?
So you're leaving your lights on for a longer period during the day.
That's right. So the calculations here are for an 18-hour day.
Okay.
All right. The calculations here are a very traditional kind of growing cycle.
All right.
But if you can push the big numbers, you should.
Yeah.
Because you can get much faster, much better production than what we're presenting.
Okay.
Right. And so that ultimately is the goal: make more money.
Right.
This is a good thing.
Yeah.
Without additional capex.
Right.
Right. So typically, what we're looking at is our lighting, and for these we have our cool bars here. These are
now we're talking about 800 roughly ZipGrow Towers.
That's right.
So you're about to present some numbers to us that are how much energy does it cost to grow 800 towers roughly?
Right. So for 800 towers, that's about 400 watt lights, and we've got about 216 of these.
Yeah.
So we've got about 216 lights, 400 watts each. That comes out to 83,000 total watts, or 83 kilowatts.
Yeah.
Per hour, right? That factors out on a daily basis, on 18-hour days, to about $181 a day.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's not a small bill.
Right. That's a full-time worker almost.
So those bars are water cooled, so it eliminates dealing with all of the crazy HVAC on the roof and upgrading HVAC. We basically just drop a chiller in there and we cool those bars.
Okay.
And so that means that our growing environment is basically set at pretty darn close to our chiller temperature, right?
Okay.
So and that's
$181 a day.
$181 for the lights, the light. Yep.
Just to light 800 towers.
That's correct.
Okay.
And $51 to cool them.
And $51 a day to cool those towers.
That's right. So if the chiller's running, $51 a day to chill them.
Okay.
So those combined costs ends up being what, like $232
per
a
day.
Yep.
Amazing.
So that seems like a big number, right?
From photons to food, right?
From photons to food.
Now,
so
what cost? You're saying this is a kilowatt hour. How much are you paying per kilowatt hour?
yeah, so that's at about 12 cents. And our electricity here in Laramie, Wyoming is a bit cheaper than that. So we can get it a little bit cheaper. There are parts of the country where it's a lot cheaper. You guys know who you are. And there are places where it's much more expensive.
Okay.
So
So there you have it, folks, from Dr. Nate. $231 a day.
Yep.
$232 a day to provide lighting for 800 ZipGrow Towers at 12 cents per kilowatt hour.
that's right.
Now, is that all of your electrical costs for that system?
No, I mean there's a lot of other costs here. We've got lots of pumps running, UV clarifiers. We have climate control equipment running. Altogether, that's fairly marginal. We're talking less than $20 a day for all of the additional equipment in that growing environment.
So, and again, we're leaving we're leaving the discussion on carbon costs out of this for now. One way you might think of this is your lights are like a full-time worker, and they're worth several full-time workers. Your lights are actually growing the crop. So if you're paying this person to work 18 hours a day, that comes out to what? A little over $10 an hour, $12 an hour.
That's right.
To power these lights to grow the crops. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that insight,
There's
Nate.
some numbers.
These are the kinds of questions we get all the time. How much will it cost me to run the lighting? What are my operating costs? And you have a team here that provides consulting to help people understand these numbers. Some people are wondering if it's worthwhile to invest in lighting for their greenhouse.
Yeah.
At what point does it become economical to do supplemental lighting in the greenhouse?
Absolutely.
So these are tough numbers, you have to run the analysis.
Yeah, and the important thing to say here is you can reduce these numbers significantly. That ends up being a little over $90,000 a year, $91,000 a year in electrical cost. A lot of folks would say, "Oh, that's crazy. That's unacceptable." But what you need to very clearly understand is your productivity is directly related to the amount of light that you give your crop. So if you cut your life, if we were to take these lights and we were to cut that bill in half, we would cut our production in half. We would cut our profits, maybe in more than half, right?
This is a full-time worker on your farm.
That's right.
Your lights they're doing the heavy lifting.
That's right. So if you go with lower wattages, right? If you go with lower wattages, you will deliver less light.
Yeah.
If you deliver less light, you will produce less product.
Okay.
That's all there is to it. So if you're treating this as a factory, right, then you want to maximize your economic output.
Okay.
Right?
So we have our bonus question here. Again, that question is, how much does it cost for 3/4 of an ounce of basil at Target? Anyone have an answer? We're going to the audience here, Nate.
The audience.
Again, thank you for tuning in. My name is Jason, here with Dr. Nate Story, CEO of Bright Agrotech. And I'm excited to be talking about indoor growing today. Let's see if we have any audience responses. Okay.
I have to refresh that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, technology.
Hang with us. Yeah, we're doing our technical interlude here. We don't have any elevator music.
I could sing some elevator music for you.
Yeah. In this episode, Nate will be singing.
It wouldn't be better than your typical elevator music, but that's not saying much.
Okay, we've got some audience members. Brittany Moreland is saying that 3/4 ounce packet of basil will cost $2.99. Mark L is guessing $3.49. And Mark O is saying $5 for that packet. we'll answer this question in a few more minutes, give people a chance to answer. And another question here, Nate. I don't know if I understand this. What is the footprint for 800 towers? Oh, okay, square footage.
Yeah, so if we're talking about a zip farm or what have you,
Yeah.
it's really variable depending on the space, because each farm is designed to fit into kind of a custom area.
Yeah.
By and large, to put in perspective, the zip farm that we're running out here, we've got right now, what do we have running? We've got 12 racks, I think, running out there.
Yeah.
So roughly one quarter of the size that we would need for around 800 towers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's occupying about 400 square feet.
Okay.
So if you're figuring 800 square towers or 800 towers, it's going to usually be less than 2,000 square feet. It just depends on the building layout.
I think Trapper was estimating this system would be about 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, 1,500 is about right.
And so we ran the numbers for renting office space, empty warehouse and office space.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of empty warehouse space out there right now. We estimated that we could pay about $3,200 a month in rent for a farm of this size.
I wouldn't pay $3,000 a month for it, but
right. I wouldn't either.
But you can.
The interesting
being
thing
conservative.
is we ran the numbers and we have enough revenue coming in to pay that level of rent.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So there you have it, Sarah. About 1,500 square feet for 800 towers. Maybe a little more if you get some irrigation and some other system seedling carts going in there.
Yeah, that's the miscellaneous stuff and how you kind of fit that into the overall footprint. That's kind of important. But typically we're talking less than 150 square feet for all of that stuff.
Okay. So we have one more section here, and we will be sharing some of these numbers with our audience. We have a financial calculator available on our shop. So if you want to see the spreadsheets, you can go to shop.brightagrotech.com and look for the financial calculator. And your team also provides consulting on these numbers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there are two packages there. One is just the light financial package. That comes with fairly minimal consulting. With all of this stuff, it is worth having someone who knows their stuff looking over your numbers. And so there's, the first package has minimal consulting. The second one comes with a lot more consulting. It's much more in depth, and it involves more numbers, right? More in depth numbers and more review by our staff. So that's the kind of the important thing to understand about the two financial packages that we offer.
Okay. So again, so far we've tried to cover labor costs for this zip farm and lighting and energy, but we still haven't gotten to packaging and distribution. So if I can review real quickly, we've put in about 22 hours in the first week, bringing all these crops to harvest. Say you wake up on Thursday morning, how much labor does it take to harvest the crop and bring it to the customer?
Yeah, you bet. So, again, it's super crop dependent. Mm-hmm. So, and it depends on the packaging for each crop as well. So, let's take lettuce, for instance. There are a few options for lettuce, right? We can do just regular baggies. We can do lettuce in clamshells. We can do loose heads in a crate, basically, or a box.
Yeah.
So, those are the different options. They have different costs, including the cost of packaging, right? So, for a clamshell, you're looking at 13 to 17 cents. Almost without fail, 13 to 17 cents. That is the clamshell. That is the plastic clamshell itself, plus the sticker. Mm-hmm. That's a value-added process. You can sell that for more at market, right? Mm-hmm. On the other end, we've just got loose heads that we're just cutting off of towers and sticking in a box, folding up, sending to a restaurant.
Yeah.
When we're just talking about cutting heads off of a tower, sending them to a restaurant, that's cheap.
Right.
That's really cheap, right?
That would be my preferred method, right? These are restaurants that they just want a weekly or bi-weekly delivery, put it in a box, drop it on their doorstep.
That's right.
Right?
If that's kind of the method that's being followed, we're talking about as much time per tower as it takes to plant the tower, right? If we're getting into more detailed methods, it depends on the type of packaging. Some clamshells are harder to use than others, right? Some types of lettuce that you're growing require more kind of taking your hands and bundling those leaves up to fit it in.
Yeah.
Than others that might just plop right in, right?
And do you recommend same day harvest, or are your growers putting in cool storage and delivering in the morning?
I highly recommend same day harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of requires weird hours sometimes, but you're in an indoor farm.
Yeah.
And so it is possible to have a nice dark period through the day and take it out for afternoon deliveries or even morning deliveries if you want. And you get to set the lighting schedule. So it's always better to harvest after a dark period. They're going to have the highest water weight. Almost all of your crops will at that point. So that's the time to harvest.
Okay.
But you can set that schedule.
Yeah.
And same day is in and of itself a powerful marketing tool.
Right.
So when the chef gets to boast about the fact that this lettuce was harvested this morning, that adds value to that product, even if you didn't do anything else.
Well, and I wish I had more information here. My question is, how much lettuce or leafy greens does a restaurant go through in a week? How much lettuce do they want?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the restaurant, but most restaurants go through several cases a week.
Case being about 50 pounds.
Yeah, they can vary from below 20. Most of them are like in the 20 to 30 pound range, typically.
Yeah.
But you can't have very heavy cases. You can have light cases.
Right.
That's the funny thing is oftentimes those sales by the case are not necessarily weight based.
So maybe 70 to 120 pounds a week for a single restaurant customer.
That's quite possible. Yeah.
Huh. All right. Well, there you have it. This harvest we're looking at is about 640 pounds on a weekly basis. So you could be looking at 5 to 10 restaurant customers.
Yep.
You'd want to, cut it off the ZipGrow Tower, put it in a box. You're going to weigh it, or is it just by unit?
Collecting your weights is really useful, right? Because some people want to pay by weight. Some people just want to pay by the case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going to depend on the product and depend on what your customers are asking for.
Okay.
I do recommend weighing your product. It's a good thing to just understand, have an actual number that you can associate with your production.
Yep.
When you're improving, when you're failing.
So that's helpful, Nate, because it does add a little time to the process. Weighing each box that comes off the tower, and then put it on a truck. Maybe you're working with someone who's doing the delivery for you. The point is you're harvesting that crop and getting it to market.
Yep.
Okay. I'll have one more chance for audience questions. And looks like our winner this week for the bonus question is Brittany Moreland. Brittany guessed $2.99 for that 3/4 ounce packet of basil at Target. The actual price is $2.49, which comes out to $53 a pound for basil, sold
retail. Yep.
Retail, sold in 3/4 ounce clamshells.
Yep. So that's the junky stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's the bad stuff.
Well, and this is the herb market, which you've talked about quite a bit.
Yep, that's right. So, at that pricing, just as a reference point, the markup is around 50%.
Okay.
So you multiply that number by 0.66, and that'll give you probably pretty darn close to the wholesale price for that product, which, is around $30 a pound in clamshells, right?
Right.
So that's what's happening on the general wholesale market.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. I'll give a call out. If you are curious about the new lighting solution that we've developed, the Dr. Nate has developed here, you'll want to go to brightagrotech.com/innovation. And Nate's sharing some of the latest innovations in lighting technology, how to cut the HVAC and cooling costs out of your facility. Again, that URL is brightagrotech.com/innovation.
That's right.
Nate, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been very helpful for me.
Thank you.
Just to understand some of these numbers. And in the future, I think we'll be talking about capital expenses. How much does it cost to start the farm? How much does the equipment cost? And then we'll get into a closer look at pricing and profitability.
I love it.
So I'm excited
Awesome.
for that.
CapEx.
Yeah. And that's it for our audience, unless I get any more questions here in the last minute. Looks like I might have one coming in. Nate, this question is from David. He's asking, do you have any experience with plasma lighting?
Not personally. We haven't used plasma a whole lot. There are some benefits to plasma, and by and large, it's a great kind of full spectrum lighting solution. Absolutely. It is still very heat intensive, but it's not a bad way to light, by and large. The issues with plasma with a lot of indoor farms, and especially vertical plane growing techniques, is that they aren't the most rugged products, and they're also very much at the end of their kind of development cycle. So when you look at the cost of a plasma light, you know that in 5 years or 10 years, the cost will probably be very similar, and the efficiency will not be significantly better than it is today. And you know you're going to bang into those things and you're going to break them. So that's kind of one of the reasons, why we tend to focus more on LEDs, is because we see this cycle where their cost is coming down. In 5 years, they will be priced very differently than they are today, and the efficiency will be significantly higher than it is today. And they're also a bit more rugged. So if we bang these things, drop these things, run into them with a cart, or some bonehead hits them with a tool or something, we don't have to worry about anything shattering.
Great question from David. Again, if you want to see the LED solution that Nate is working on, brightaggrotech.com/innovation. Check it out. And we have a question here from Profitable Growth Services. They're asking, how long of a dark period do you need before you harvest?
Basically, it just depends on how fast your crop hydrates. So basically, during photosynthesis, there's water demand, right? So it's losing water because it's going through photosynthesis. It's undergoing all these processes are happening. It's consuming a lot of water in the process. It's losing a lot of water through transpiration because it's exchanging gases. And so you have this water deficit, right? The plant is not fully hydrated typically when it's running full bore, under light. But as soon as we turn those lights off, the stomata close up, the plant begins to replenish its water supply, the cells expand and become more turgid, and you increase the overall weight of the plant, right? Some plants it takes 4 or 5 hours. Depending on the kind of drought stress or stress that they were subjected to during the light cycle. But if you're growing fairly well and you're not subjecting them to too much stress during your lighting cycle, sometimes an hour to 2 hours is sufficient to get those plants all the way back up to water weight. And that's with crops like lettuce or basil.
So what happens if
crops.
you don't give the crop enough time?
If you don't give the crop enough time, if you harvest in the middle of a light cycle or towards the end of a light cycle, it can impact the shelf life of the product, right? Because it's going into packaging without having necessarily enough water, and it's just in a little bit poorer quality. The shelf life will be a little bit lower, and your overall weights will be a little bit lower. And so if you're selling on a weight basis, then the more water you can sell, the better. Water is cheap.
Yeah.
And so giving them an hour of darkness, 2 hours of darkness, 6 hours of darkness before you harvest is always a very helpful way to bump your weights up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Looks like we're getting more questions, Nate. I'll just keep going here.
Okay.
Generally speaking, there's a follow-up question from Profitable Growth Services. Thank you. Generally speaking, how long can freshly harvested crop be in transport without hurting quality?
So it depends on the crop, and it depends on the kind of transport. If we're talking about a refrigerated truck, it's common for refrigerated trucks to ship things like heads of lettuce for a week, right? Now, the product that you get is not that high of quality, Most of our growers are very local, right? So they're focused on local markets. They're doing same day delivery or next day delivery, something like that. We're talking about a transit time of a few hours at most, typically.
Yeah.
And if that's happening in a refrigerated truck, then there's very little impact on product quality, with the exception of herbs that just like basil that just shouldn't be refrigerated. By and large, there's
Right.
you can transport them for a long period of time in the right conditions
Right.
without an impact to quality, a significant impact to quality. We're talking a day or two.
Yeah.
But that's just not what most of our customers end up doing.
Right. Well, and we have a debate going. Is it worth it for you to invest in a refrigerated truck, or are you going to find a distribution service that can handle your product for you?
That's right.
And you may care to comment on that. I don't know if you're prepared to deal with that.
For most growers that are dealing with really hyper-local markets, having a refrigerated truck is not necessary because it's so fast from harvest to delivery, and then it goes into your customer's refrigeration unit, right, their cooler, that you don't need that. That's a lot of cost for something that you use a very small amount. You're not delivering these long distances. And so you really don't need that kind of a truck.
But you will need a truck.
But you may need a truck or some type of delivery vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say that, we used basically a converted station wagon to deliver for the first couple of years here in Laramie, right? We're moving this 2 miles.
Yeah.
And we're moving it live oftentimes. So that served its purpose, right?
Yeah.
Now you want to make sure it's up to health code. You want to make sure that, that you're doing things right. But it doesn't require, a big 18-wheeler or even a large box truck for most growers to get their deliveries done and get them done fast.
And Curtis Stone is doing it on a bicycle, so
yeah,
there you go.
There you go. Do it on a bike. Otherwise, talking about using another service, we have growers that do that. We, the farm that we co-own down in Colorado, we've used a distribution service in the past, and it can be very handy. It can be very useful if you don't really want to get into logistics. However, I do discourage people from doing that in smaller communities with hyperlocal markets. It's not that hard to figure out your logistics, and it is worth figuring that out, right? The services that we used added another 20%. So they add 20% to your wholesale cost, and then that gets pushed up again by the retailer or by the restaurant to the customer. And the goal overall is to give people the most value. So it varies from market to market, product to product, and person to person.
Right. So I'll put in a short disclosure here, and then we'll take one final question.
Okay.
The disclosure is, we work primarily with ZipGrow Towers, so the labor numbers we're providing here are relevant for
That's
ZipGrow.
right.
These will not translate directly to other techniques like Beto buckets or NFT, but you can take some of that and just try to, imagine, the labor costs going into your system.
And we can help with some of that. If you get a hold of us, we can help with some of those labor costs. While we do use primarily ZipGrow Towers, farm down in Colorado uses buckets. We use NFT troughs. We use other things as well as row crops.
Yeah.
So those are questions that can be answered, but again, those numbers are just for our type of setup.
Okay, good. Final question from Carlos. Thanks, Carlos. If I have an RGB LED strip, would any color be better for growing plants?
Not necessarily. I mean, absorption's highest in the red and the blue spectrum, specifically around 450 nanometers in the blue and 660 nanometers in the red. Green is not, absorbed really, really well. Green, there is some absorption there, and more people are incorporating green into their lighting. It's a signaling. It's useful for plant metabolism, if not necessarily photosynthesis. So no, I mean, if you're in the right kind of spectrum there, then you should be fine. Now the thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you're fairly on. the human eye has a very hard time telling the difference between 450 nanometers and 410 nanometers. And there's a fairly significant difference in absorption rates between those 2 points.
So how do you tell?
You need a par meter, or you need to buy it from a reputable supplier, right?
Okay.
So there are more and more lighting companies out there that are selling snake oil, to be perfectly honest. And it's been a frustration for us. It's been a frustration for a lot of our customers.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that they're using the right LEDs, quality LEDs, and that they've got a good brand, and that they're willing to stand behind their lights.
Good. Nate, I really want to thank you for your time. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot to our lovely audience. Again, if you want to see the LED solution that Nate has been working on, that URL is brightaggrotech.com/innovation. Thank you again. We'll sign off for now, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds great. See you guys later.